Welcome everybody to our March webinar, which is about modern learning platforms and how the LMS evolves. And I'm delighted to be introducing John Curran, who you may know is a former chair of the board of directors at the eLearning Network. And without further ado, I am going to stop talking and hand over to you, John.
Thank you, Joan. Yes, I was a chair of the ELN and the director for 4 years. Lots of hard work. Joan is still keeping up the good work. But, you know, I really like the ELN. I think the ELN really got me sort of up to speed on a lot of things in e-learning. And certainly, you know, if you're not a member, I definitely recommend joining the ELN. I'll talk a bit more about the ELN at the very end. So, okay, so my name is John Curran. I'm a call myself a learning architect these days. I used to be an instructional designer, although I've done lots and lots of things in the way of online learning and information design, etc. So why am I? So my primary focus is creating online courses for clients. So and also I run workshops on things like instructional design and also tools like Storyline. So why am I talking about LMSs? I'm not technically an LMS expert, but like most of you probably, I have to use the damn things, and and I've always been really concerned over the years as to where I put my lovely made learning. So for me, LMSs are a critical piece in the jigsaw. So today I'm going to take you through what I prefer now to call learning platforms, some modern learning platforms, and looking at how the LMS is evolving, specifically from a designer, a course designer's perspective. So the LMS market is pretty massive. At one time I did a search and I think I found 2,000 LMSs. That's a hard choice to buy. Make a choice from 2,000 is really hard. Here there's a website called Capterra. I'll share some more about this later on. But on Capterra there are 453 LMS listed. They're reviewed, etc. So even 453, that's an awful lot of LMSs to choose from. So first of all, my first question is actually, well, do we really need an LMS? I often work with smaller training companies, and they want to start doing learning online. And then I mention this thing called LMS, and they go, well, what the hell is that? Do we need it? So do we really need an LMS? So can you type into the chat whether we think we do, we don't, or maybe we do? Has anyone tried launching any learning without an LMS? Okay, so some people have tried. That's good. That's good. Yeah, in some capacity. Yes, probably agree with that. Yes, I do count Moodle as LMS. We'll mention Moodle later on. Semi-successful. Good. Yeah. So actually, in practice, you don't actually need an LMS to connect learners with learning. You can build something great in Storyline or any of those other tools. You can publish it to a web format and then upload it to your website or to an intranet. And then just share the link with learners. So actually, to let learners access your content, you do not need an LMS. Even on things like a website, you can manage users, and even using things like cookies and things, actually check whether a course has been completed or not. So some of the basic sort of stuff an LMS would be expected to do can be done without an LMS. And for some people, actually, starting without the LMS is not a bad idea. Sometimes I say to some of my customers, well, actually, some of the worst place to put your beautifully crafted learning is actually on the LMS, because people can't find it, they can't get into the LMS, they hate the LMS anyway. So actually, it's often the worst place to put your beautifully crafted learning. So what else does an LMS do? So let's take a look at what other things it does. Well, first of all, it provides a catalogue of courses. So all the courses available should be on the LMS. It tracks those course completions. It tracks progress to the courses. So it also manages learners. So we can decide which learners get access to the content, and also what roles those learners have. So for example, managers might see more than supervisors. So it lets us control who sees what. It also does things like some of those compliance things, like record assessments, issue certificates, and also do some more fancy learning analytics. And they may also include some content development stuff too. So some course building tools or some other content development features and functions. So actually, they do. So there's actually a lot more in LMS than you could probably be able to do on a website. So generally, people do, after they've considered the options, plump for an LMS of some type. One of the things I've always found with LMSs is they focus primarily on the management back end. So they are really designed as management systems that sort of do learning. And as a learning designer, I found this really difficult. For me, I always wanted to, why aren't they, they're much less about the learning, much more about the management systems. But over the years, I think things have changed, and we're seeing now a lot more focus on learners, and also the sort of courses you develop. Management reporting is still important, but now people are realizing actually, the user experience is what's really important. And also we're seeing now increasingly more of these, what we used to call learning content management systems. They don't always get that title these days, where part of the role of the LMS is also to create the content, create the learning content within the LMS. So not using a separate automating tool, but actually creating content within the LMS. So we'll touch on some of that as we go through this. We'll go through this talk. Oh, sorry, I'll turn off the chat. Sorry about that. I'll turn off the chat, blocking the slides. So I want to do this. We're going to look at 3 LMS hats. So we're going to look at what the LMS looks like from 3 different people. So I'm going to introduce my team. So first of all, we've got our learner with his learner hat. He's called Harry. So he's going to represent our learner experience. And then enter stage right, we have Megan. So she's going to be our course experience, course design experience. So she's basically like me. So how we're going to, what's the LMS going to look like for me as a course designer? And then finally, last but not least, we have the William, who's our management experience hat. Those names have nothing to do with the royal family. That's entirely coincidental. So we're going to now take a look at each of what the LMS looks like from each of these characters. So first of all, the learner hat. So I've got some of all these will be provided as a handout later. So I've got a nice list that you can, a little checklist you can use at the end of this to check off some of these things. So for the learner, well, one of the things is, does it look good? Is it easy to use? Can I access it on my various other devices? So that's critical. That sort of, does it have curb appeal? And then after that, well, what courses are available? How do I choose a course? What's my progress? What do I still need to do? How do I know I've done stuff? Can I review things and rate things? Another thing is it just me and the PC? Or can I interact with the learners? Is there someone there to help me? So divide those things into 3 areas. There's the user experience, the content experience, and also the social and support experience. So let's take a look at an example of that. So I'm going to take a look here. This is a FutureLearn. I don't know if anybody of you ever done a course on FutureLearn. I'd strongly recommend you sign up to FutureLearn. Many courses are free. It's just a really good example of really high quality user experience design when it comes to digital learning. So I go to FutureLearn, I choose my course category, and then I find some courses. So if you notice each course, it tells me at each course how long it's going to take and how much time per week it's going to take. FutureLearn courses do involve quite a few hours. They're not something you do in 30 minutes. They're definitely not micro-learning. So for example, this bottom course on the left, 4 weeks, 2 hours per week. I then join that course. And then this is my sort of course view. So if you notice, what FutureLearn does really well is identifying what you have to do, what you've done, and what you've still got left to do. It has these 3 tabs, your to-do tab, your activity tab, and also your progress tab. This is a course I'm actually following on logical and critical thinking, a really good course actually. As you can see, I'm really far behind. So the course is at week 5 and I'm still doing week 1. I have caught up a bit since then. But it's really nice to go back in and find out whether I'm ahead or behind and to see what I've got to do. So for me, it's all about sort of like really important to know where I am in the course. And the progress tabs give me some sort of overall idea of how much I've completed on the course. So a really well designed user experience. A lot of effort was put into Future Learn. A lot of prototyping was done with learners to really make it a really excellent user experience. It's actually owned by the Open University. It's a sort of semi-commercial arm of the Open University. So that's the learning experience. So, you know, for me, the learning experience is really important. It has to feel really simple, really, you know, really, it looks simpler than it is basically. But when it comes to putting a course together, things are a bit more complicated. So as a course designer, I'm thinking, well, what type of courses can I build? You know, are there content authoring tools built in? Can I create a curriculum or a pathway? Does it support learner interaction, i.e. between learners? Can I have a neat tutor? Can I create a blended course? Does it support webinars like this? Does it support the idea of a cohort, people going through a course together? Or are assignments supported? So a lot more sort of, you know, more detailed questions about you know, what sort of courses I can build in the LMS. And to help me do this, I often use this, what I call this digital learning map. So probably most people imagine see e-learning in this thing I call the e-lesson. So the 30-minute interactive e-learning module, the sort of thing you build in Captivate or Storyline. And of course, a lot of e-learning is there, but actually digital learning can do so much more than that. You know, we can extend that what we call the e-course. So actually, if you look at something like Future Learn, it's in that territory. So they use video as the lessons, but then they connect those together in a learning pathway to create an e-course. An e-course could include, for example, live online, so things like these webinars. Pushing out further, we get to a blended course where we're actually mixing a bit of digital and a bit of offline, and ultimately incorporating an actual live classroom. So I think this is a really useful way of thinking about you know, what a learning architect's role is. So some of these are self-paced, what we technically call asynchronous, so e-lessons and e-courses. The Future Learn actually is self-paced, although it starts at a certain date and finishes at a certain date. You can join anytime and catch up. But then we also have cohort-based, so we have to start at a certain time, work through it together, so it's synchronous. So for example, a webinar is a good example of a synchronous event. We have to be here at this time to see it. Obviously, we can record it and catch up with it later, but it's better to be there, you know, when it was first produced. So I'm also looking at the top when looking at LMS, sort of courses we can develop. So probably the most common is the self-paced course. So the sort of thing you once again use Storyline or Articulate to develop. So you develop the course, you put it online, people access it, and it's finished. But we can add on something onto that. So we can add a social element, so people can access a course and maybe interact with each other. So Future Learn actually has that. Future Learn has this social element. So although we're essentially working our way through self-paced material, we can also interact with other learners. And the next step up is supported. So we support our learners using an e-moderator or an e-tutor, which really adds a lot of extra value. Rarely is it done because actually that requires somebody to do that role. And certainly when I find work with clients, there isn't funding for that person, which is a shame because actually, you know, supporting courses with an e-tutor can be a very powerful extra tool in your arsenal. And then finally, there's the blended approach, which is becoming increasingly more popular, but it's quite tricky to get to design a really good blend, to mix offline and offline. But certainly in the future, I think we'll see more effective blends. And then this idea of conveyor, the access, so 24/7. I mean, pretty much everything these days is 24/7. One of the reasons e-learning has become so popular is you can log on at any time and complete whatever you need to do and then tick off and you're done. So it's a very efficient way of doing it. But also a cohort, the thing about it is often that it feels quite lonely doing it on your own. It's quite nice to work through some learning content with other people. And also it's been demonstrated that the completion rates are higher if you're part of a cohort. So if you work with something together, there's more chance that you're going to complete it. So for me, you know, both the classroom workshop and the e-learning module, often I characterize them as the one-hit wonder. So we don't know that much. We come along, we do our e-learning, we do our workshop. For that moment in time, we're sort of pretty well informed. And over time, we sort of forget it all again. The sort of, you know, both the face-to-face workshop and the e-learning module are often the triumph of efficiency over effectiveness. with good reason. It makes sense why we're aiming for that efficiency, but we want to make sure we don't also lose the effectiveness. So one thing about LMSs is they also need to support a more gradual approach. So what we tend to call a learning pathway. So here we provide some input, it could be any lesson or a video or something. We also practice in between. So the orange bits are the input and the blue bits are the practice. And the idea that over time we build competence. So rather than suffer the forgetting curve, we take people through a learning journey. So and on that pathway, there can be lots of learning activities. So we can have our e-lessons, that's our SCORM things, our interactive things we develop in Storyline. We can have videos, so things like Future Learn majors on videos, quizzes, handouts, screencasts, worksheets. All these things can be used within the learning pathway. So when I'm looking at LMS and looking, well, can we include all of these things in our learning pathway? So it's all about, for me, the time-land competence. Can somebody learn something in 30 minutes? Maybe they can. Maybe a quick introduction to GDPR, or maybe they need a bit longer. Maybe they need to do a bit, practice a bit, do some research, talk to some other people. Maybe it takes a bit longer to learn something, or it might take longer still. Most Future Learn courses are 4 to 6 weeks long. They've identified actually that's a really nice time to do some proper learning, but actually there is an end to it. So let's look at some example pathways. So this is an example pathway from LMS called actually Pathway. In fact, I helped develop this with Willow DNA a few years ago. Actually, one of the programs developed with it, this IPA Foundation Certificate, actually won a gold award at the e-learning awards. Classic pathway approach. So we work our way through content. We tell the learner how long each thing is going to take. So the idea is we complete it through over time, either with a cohort or using a conveyor. Another classic example is Udemy. I don't know if you've ever used Udemy. Once again, uses a classic pathway approach. This time uses videos rather than SCORM type things. But a really good example of using a pathway to take people through a learning journey. Does anybody recognize these activities? Recognize the LMS that's from? Somebody mentioned it earlier on. That's actually Moodle. So those are the Moodles that come out of the box in Moodle. So quite a lot of choice there. Actually, when I look at most people's Moodle sites, they primarily use the SCORM package, maybe the quiz as well. A lot of the other things aren't used, which is a bit of a shame. There's actually quite a lot of richness in some of those activities, but they aren't used as frequently as they should be. So Megan says, oh, well, maybe you mean the ingredients. Yes, good point, Megan. Here's another one. So this is the Learn Upon LMS. So probably this is a more reduced set. So most LMSs have a more reduced set. This is probably typical of most what I'd call commercial LMSs. So you don't have quite the toolkit you have in Moodle. So one thing that is important when we think about LMSs is whether we are going to build our content in the LMS. So are there tools in the LMS that us do it in the LMS, or we're going to use the LMS plus an authoring tool? Probably I'd say the LMS plus the authoring tool is still the most popular option. But there are pros and cons to both approaches. We'll touch on some of those a bit later on. So finally, we get onto the manager's hat. So manager, well, that's all about efficiency. So can I allocate courses automatically? Can I make sure this block of people does that? Can I monitor effective progress and completion reporting for my compliance? What are the learning analytics? Give me a nice dashboard. Courses that are quick to develop. Most managers are horrified that these courses take so long and are so expensive to develop. It kind of link with other HR systems. So can I import my people from my HR system into my LMS? And can I export some completion tracking out? Usually the sort of things we get asked when we're talking to a manager. And generally managers are the people who buy LMSs. Paradoxically, they're not usually so interested in learning. They're much more interested in the back office side of it. And obviously some organizations take it further, things like competency framework, talent management, career development. So some of the really expensive LMSs like Saba and stuff are increasingly building in those sort of tools. So, you know, certainly for a manager, what they want is a really cool dashboard to see who's done what, when they did it. And particularly these days, visual dashboards are very, very popular. But also, you know, they want to see lots of reporting. So, you know, pretty much anybody I talk to, they have their own special report they want. So the LMSs are really good now at creating those reports. But also, actually, this is actually a slide from the Elucidate authoring tool. I had to show that because I couldn't get any LMSs to show this granularity. So actually, some of the authoring tools are now catching up with these learning analytics. So actually, what this does, it reports exactly, you know, what's happening at a granular level with a particular course. So some really interesting data coming out of that, especially if you're a learning course developer. You will actually, you know, is the course hitting the mark? And so increasingly, I think we will see, and for me, it's all about, you know, what they don't know rather than what they do know. And I think increasingly we're going to see more of this. So this is where I think in one area where learning analytics will go. Problems have with it is it'll produce lots of data. Whether we're actually able to handle that data is a different matter. And the final thing here is about the just in case versus just in time. So the idea of courses or resources. So increasingly we're hearing a lot of people saying, oh, courses aren't so popular. Let's have lots and lots of resources. So just in time versus the just in case. These are the 5 moments of need. I did a workshop a while ago on 5 moments of need. So I think it's important now, if you're going to buy an LMS or think about an LMS, is whether courses and resources will be on the same platform, and how actually learners will access those from that platform. For me, courses are about learning design, good learning design, and resources are more about good information design. Good. Okay, so that finishes our sort of 3-hat view. So now we're going to just take a quick tour of some of those 453 platforms. I'm not going to cover that many. I just want to just dive around and cover some interesting examples, some different approaches. There's a lot of overlap between LMSs. So you know, a lot of them do a lot of things. Some of them focus on certain things well. So I just want to go through and just give you a feel and a flavor for the sort of things that the LMSs you might be considering do. So we're going to start with what I would call the conventional LMS. So here's an example here of the Absorb LMS. So you access it, you go in, there's a catalog, there's some courses. Usually you only see the courses that are allocated to you. So that catalog may or may not be there. You may be able to choose a course, you may be able to self-enroll on a course, but generally in most organizations, courses are pre-selected for you depending on your role. You access the course, you go into the course, and in this case, for example, it's a single e-lesson, an interactive e-learning module, score module. You complete it, it's marked as complete, and you're done. The sort of conventional e-learning approach. Here's another example from Litmos, another very popular LMS at the moment. I mean, if you notice, both these LMSs look much better than LMSs did years ago. So they definitely have done a lot of work on the learner experience to make it look more friendly, so that for learners feel it's something that they're engaged in. So that's the Absorb LMS and the Litmos LMS. So I think most of these conventional LMSs are aimed at organizations. They're generally priced according to the number of learners. They generally assume learners are always active. So a learner goes on, and over their period of time with your organization, they'll have lots of learning to do. So that they're always, the idea would they be logging in quite frequently. Focuses on courses rather than resources. Resources may be there, but only to support a course. They'll maybe link to other HR systems, so usually some integrations are available. They're usually very strong reporting features, good dashboards, good reporting. And they'll increasingly these days include some form of gamification. So that's nowadays most LMSs have some level of gamification. So the next category I'm going to look at is the video LMS, and these have really taken off in recent years. So whereas I spend a lot of my time developing really fancy interactive e-learning, alongside that, a lot of people are just saying, well, forget that, let's just make really cool videos. and then use that as our lesson, what I call the video lesson. So sites like Udemy basically focus on the video. Future Learn also uses videos. There's no SCORM in Future Learn. There's no SCORM in Udemy. So they use the video approach. But they do use things like learning pathways. So Udemy actually very rarely is there just one video. There'll normally be a number of videos, usually no more than 3 minutes, sometimes a bit longer. And there may also be other resources there as well. But the primary delivery mechanism is a video. Sometimes they're really good quality videos, sometimes they're really, really poorly made videos. Nevertheless, the video is the prime candidate. So Udemy is a really good example of that. Often the UX the user interface is really well designed. Udemy has over the years has become, the interface has got better and better. They're often aimed at more commercial learning providers. There's often these more social things like rate, review, and recommend. So how do you rate a course? So that as a course developer, that's a really powerful feature. They often don't support interactive content, and they often don't support SCORM. So Udemy, for example, is a SCORM-free zone. So the next one to look at is the content creation LMS, or the LCMS. There's a really cool one coming out at the moment called Lessonly. I'm just going through and doing some work on a demo of that. So that's got an awful lot of tools built in, and really well put together tools. So increasingly you're going to see more of these cool LCMSs. Another one you may be familiar with is Fuse. Once again, it uses it primarily uses video. If you've ever been to learning technologies, Fuse are usually the big pink ones, so they're very pink. They will the pink stand. Usually when you come in, there's a great big lodge of pink. That's Fuse Universal. They're called. Also, it strongly uses video, but also has the idea of user-generated content. The initial idea certainly was to users make their own video and to share them with peers and to learn from each other. I think that's actually quite a challenge for most organizations, but certainly when Fuse first came along, that was a really cool USP it had. Not only was it video driven, but also it was user generated content. Often these things too incorporate workflow. So for example, you can start to create a course in the LMS and get people to review it and then publish it all in one fell swoop. There's none of this going to external tool, getting people to view it and uploading it. A lot of that's built in. Collaboration features are also built in. They'll often have the rate, review, and recommend features built in too. Often there's limited interactivity. So if you're using video, it's usually just watching a video. Increasingly, I think we will begin to see interactive video, but most of these LMSs don't yet support that. They often support simpler course development, so they have templates and things to put a course together. So actually putting a curriculum together in Udemy is pretty straightforward. Video with a handout, video with a handout, video with a handout is pretty much the approach Udemy takes. One of the problems with these things, it can be potentially difficult to move content elsewhere. I mean, obviously you've got videos, they're not so bad to move, but actually once you've crafted your beautiful course in an LCMS, it's quite hard to take it to another LCMS. Once again, we have this idea of do you go for the LCMS, or do you go with the LMS versus the LMS plus the authoring tool? So a critical decision actually. I mean, you can still have most LCMSs will support external content as well, but actually, I think if you're new to LMSs, it's quite a big decision to decide whether to go on and use an external tool or whether to find one that actually develops content within the LMS itself. So here's another example. So we're talking about courses rather than resources, to just in time rather than just in case. So this is a fairly new platform called Loop. That's Loop with 3 O's. And this focuses on resources rather than courses. So it looks at the LMS as being, well, why are we doing all these? Why are we creating courses is hard work? It takes a lot of time. Actually, why wouldn't it be much better to create lots of resources and then chain those together to create an ideal course? And so Loop, actually does this really well. So you can put things like videos in, you can put articles, you can put all sorts of things in. It's user generated, or it's also user curated content. So it's a simple build process. You don't need a learning designer. Oh dear, what a pity. It supports curation as well as creation. You also has got the rate, review, and recommend. The idea that the more things are looked at, the more popular they become, therefore the more useful they are. Doesn't always work out like that, but that's part of the idea. There's detailed analytics. Think about what you get out of Google. Often there's gamification built in as well. So I've done this, I need to do that. Once again, though, it's potentially difficult to move content elsewhere. But you know, I think we're going to see more of these resources rather than courses, LMSs springing up. So the next one to look at is the social LMS. Now, years ago, when I first came across this, is actually Curator from HT2 Labs. So when I first came across Curator, I was really impressed by it, primarily because of its social features. So what Curator did was provide some content, but then facilitated a discussion around that content. So learners could interact with each other. The course developer could also interact, so a bit like an e-tutor or an e-moderator. So there was a certain richness to the conversations around the learning, which, you know, was really quite a refreshing approach to a normal watch an e-learning module, pass the test, and forget about it. So, you know, I think it's really important to think about whether you want your learners to interact with each other. Is there some value in that? Is that something, you know, when we go on a face-to-face course, we interact with each other. So sometimes, you know, you come away from a face-to-face course, and the most important thing you've done is met somebody and shared some ideas with them. So that, you know, I think the social aspect of digital learning is something that's often overlooked. Things like supporting curation as well as creation. So there's really lots of good stuff out there. So Curator makes it's actually a big play of this. Well, why don't we just join these things together into a learning pathway, add some stuff of our own, have some good conversations around it, and actually we develop a really great learning experience without actually it costing a great deal of development time. Once again, it's potentially difficult to move content elsewhere. Once again, Creator also was you know, led the field in having lots of cool gamification features. So, talking about gamification, we're going to now move on to the gamified LMS. Now, actually, as I said at the start, most LMSs these days are increasingly providing some gamification features. And actually, in quite a lot of LMSs, they're getting quite good. This is an example from LearnUpon. This is a really popular LMS made in Dublin, so it's quite a local one. You know, over the years it's got better and better, and it's used by quite a lot of organizations now. It's well priced, and it has some really nice gamification features. Another one you may have come across, certainly at Learning Technologies, is Growth Engineering's Academy LMS. So they also made a really big play for gamification. So yeah, really things like leaderboards and sort of probably really good if you're trying to train a sales team or something. Doesn't always work, but certainly gamification is something that you expect to find now in most LMSs. The extent to which it you know, joins everything together is you know, needs to be decided. So sometimes it can be a bit over the top. So what we call structural gamification. We also have gamification in the content, so we can build storyline modules that feel like games. We can build little games and scenario things and things like storyline or adapt or some of those responsive tools. But actually, when we talk about structural gamification, we talk about doing it at the LMS level, which is probably actually the best place to do it. So ideally, both the content and the LMS should support gamification. And also supports things like nagware, so things like notifications. So even things like Future Learn, I get nagware saying you know, they're starting week 2, you're a bit behind. So I think that nagware is also an important part of the gamified approach. So on to something that, you know, looks a bit more boring, but actually this is what I call the education LMS. So anybody recognize what this is? Hopefully some of you should recognize it. So this is classic Moodle, classic course in Moodle. So Moodle, you know, it's probably one of the most, you know, educationally sound LMSs. They don't even call it an LMS, and things like it competes with things like Blackboard and Canvas, which are technically virtual learning environments. But you know, I think increasingly the difference is becoming less clear. So certainly Moodle has made a jump over to corporate world, particularly with the help with Totoro, which adds a really nice reporting engine onto it. So I'm a really big fan of Moodle. I think it does what it does really well. It's very strong pedagogically. And actually, it can look really good these days. So lots of cool people are doing lots of cool stuff with Moodle. So Moodle courses can also look really cool. So now it's and also it's an open source product. So therefore it has some benefits when it comes to pricing as well. So definitely it's probably most pedagogically strong of most of the LMSs I work with. It also got very strong built-in content development tools. I showed those activities at the start. They aren't always used. In fact, they're often not used. But certainly there are lots of toys and tools that be used in Moodle. It also very strong in learner-to-learner interaction. It supports e-tutors. It supports things like assignments and feedback. It has things like a grade book, has an assessment engine. These things are often open source. Moodle isn't the only one. There are a few others. They're often very good supporting third-party tools, like things like a plagiarism checkers and a thing called H5P, which is an interactive content development tool. The downside is poor management reporting, and that's generally why most people don't like Moodle, and generally why people would opt for Totoro if they want really strong management reporting, with your management reporting hat on. But Moodle has a massive user base, and certainly something that I always think you always should be considered as an option. So now something a lot more modern is these what I call the courses for sale LMS. So increasingly, I think Google said a few years ago, learning is the next best thing on the next big thing on the web, and that applies commercially as well. So a lot of these tools, this one is actually called Teachable. This is an example of a website put together by a trainer. Developing a complete digital program using actually once again primarily video, but using the pathway approach. So Teachable.com is a really interesting platform. It's not the only one though. There's other ones out there. So one of the other ones I really like, I've been reviewing recently, is Thinkific. So and when you sign up to Thinkific, it's free to sign up. Generally they let you create your course for free. If anyone get learners on it, you start having to pay. So as a learning developer, that's quite a nice way to let you in, have a little play with the tool and see if you can create the course you need to create. But it actually sort of steps you through, almost like uses a wizard approach to help you put your course together. And then it has lots of tools to help you market and to do things like pricing and stuff, and create a pricing plan. So if there's any sort of would-be course developers out there who want to sell some courses online, some of these platforms are really interesting, but they're also really interesting also if you wanted to teach people in an organization as well. So this is the back end for Teachable. So Teachable lets you create a nice sales page, has a really nice way of quick and building tool, has things like a drip, what they call a drip. So that's basically, there's a cohort approach, so each week it launches some new content. It has gamification built in, it has rate review and recommends built in. Some of those really cool sort of social media things you expect on the web these days are all built in, or sort of baked into these new LMSs. They're usually video lesson focused. In fact, it's quite hard to find any that support SCORM. You can usually support interactive content using some sort of embed code. I know Thinkific, that's the way you can handle interactive content with Thinkific. Teachable, you can't even do that, although you may be able to in the future. Generally, they're SCORM-free zones. So they don't support SCORM in the old-fashioned way. They have lots of course templates built in to simplify development. They have built-in marketing tools, built-in e-commerce. So everything's using things like Shopify usually built in. There's usually a complete website builder. So you can build all the sort of pages around your courses. The platform's often free or very low cost, but then you pay when people start to do your courses. And if you really are on a budget, then actually, if you've ever used WordPress, I mean, many websites are developed these days using WordPress. So if you've got a WordPress site and you want to add some learning content, then there's a few great WordPress plugins. One of the most popular ones, and one's been going for a long time, is LearnDash. So that lets you create courses. create pathways, and also has some e-commerce stuff built into it. So once again, quite a low budget, but actually over the years become more and more effective approach to developing, learning content. It's a really neat way of developing an LMS on a really tight budget. And it's also quite flexible the way you can build a course. Mainly video, although they do support Learn-support Score and XAPI via additional plugins. You have to pay a bit more for that, but not an awful lot. When the reporting isn't brilliant, it uses the standard sort of WordPress type reporting, Google Analytics type of stuff. So they're less good if you wanted to use it for an organization. And so this is something I want to talk about, the invisible LMS. So actually, probably the best LMS is someone you don't even know you're in. So I've worked a lot of work with Sponge over the years, and in quite a few cases we wanted to develop something that we maybe do a sort of work in a particular group of learners on a particular sort of subject matter. We didn't want to put it into the big corporate LMS. So we develop a sort of a top front end. So Sponge, this is a project developed by Sponge for Tesco. It's a few years ago now. So they developed a sort of white label LMS. Behind it, there is a very simple LMS, but basically it lets you create these screens on top of it. So it doesn't look like an LMS, doesn't feel like an LMS. So it's accessing learning content, but also providing dashboards and reporting back to management. So something like we called it a bit sort of beneath the radar LMS. So we sort of got an LMS working, but we didn't call it an LMS. It was basically wrapped into the accessing the content. The good thing about it is you can make them all look very different. So here's a very different one. It uses actually the same back end, but it looks completely different to the Tesco one. So in some ways, there's a strong advantage in doing that. And increasingly, I think you will see more of these invisible LMSs. If you've got the budget to do it, it can be a very, very powerful approach. So finally, to find my final stopping point on this high-speed tour, and it's always relates back to a webinar we had last month from Filter. This is Global Filter. So this is what I call the intelligent LMS. This is an LMS where actually we're going to build in some AI. So actually, what we're doing now is we're going to enter some details of what we want to learn, and then the LMS is going to go and find us some stuff to learn. And then as we engage with the content, it then decides on it then starts to decide, well, actually maybe you like this or like that, or you've got to do this. So a bit like when you're looking for stuff on Amazon, it says, well, look, you like that, you may like this. So using AI to help sort of feed up learning content. And for example, this is actually my recent dashboard for me from the Global Filter, and it's got 2 future learn courses. So how to succeed in the global workplace, well, 12 hours, maybe think twice before I clicked on that. Whereas some of the other things are TED videos or articles, 5-15 minutes. So it's quite actually a nice way of mixing maybe proper course content with resources. So that you're starting to see courses and resources in the same place, which I think definitely is the way things will start to go. Another great example is Degreed. If you come across it, Degreed, it's a free, so you can sign up to Degreed, and it does a very similar thing. It also adds this social aspect to it. So, for example, I've typed in things to do with instruction design. So over the last few weeks, it's come up with some really interesting stuff on instruction design. And the more you engage with it, the more it sort of gets to know the sort of level, the sort of things you're interested in. And then you can also engage in conversations and potentially connect with other people who are interested in the same stuff. So once again, a really interesting approach. So definitely the Global Filter is a link there. You can sign up for that for free, and also Degreed is also free. So they both use AI and profiling. So to start out, you normally type in some stuff about what you want to learn. So it then does a basic sort of search, but from then on uses AI to try and sort of hone in on what's really interesting to you. Primarily they use curation rather than creation. So they're saying, well, look, there's stuff out there. We're just going to bring that stuff to you. They use great learning analytics as well, so you can see, well, the sort of things I've looked at, things I found useful. They generally incorporate gamification as well. and generally they also have some sort of learner-to-learner interaction, which is also really useful. So that completes my tour of the LMSs. I don't sell any of those products. I'm just giving those as examples. So just want to quickly talk about pricing models. So the pricing models in itself is a nightmare. So, you know, clients will say to me, oh, we need to get an LMS, John. You know, what's the best one to choose? I think, oh my God, there's 453. So I think, oh, that's a challenge. So actually what I generally use is, well, what's your budget? So generally I'll use the price as an initial sort of cut, and then say, well, if they're really low budget, then you know, I've got these few to look at. And if they've got a bit more money, then we have a wider selection. So pricing is really confusing. So they can be based on permanent users, active users. So if you haven't logged in for a month, then you're not charged for that user. They're often done on user number banding. So up to, for example, here, this is the learner non-pricing. So up to 100 users, up to 500 users. So you know, if you only have 100 users at any one time, active users are quite useful. So learn upon will, you know, if you only have 50 users at any one time, then you can go for the bronze option. But if if users are constantly accessing content, then you need to move up to the silver, and that's a big step up. Often other LMSs, you know, so the cost, the pricing varies. This is Talent LMS, another LMS I've used quite a bit, mainly because it's quite cheap, but also, you know, it has all the basic features you need. But you know, it doesn't have some of the bells and whistles that Learn Upon has. It has some of the nice gamification that Learn Upon has, but you know, may still do the job we need it to do. Other ones, so some of these more modern ones, the you know, the courses for sale, the resources ones, they're often quite cheap to get started on. So some of them take commission. So if you start selling courses, they'll take a commission on those courses. Or if you don't want that, then you can pay a bit more and pay no commission. So lots of different approaches to pricing. But one thing that is very, very positive generally is most of them are pay as you go. So in the old days, when I first started working with LMSs, you had to fork out £20,000 just to get started, and then you had to pay X thousand pounds a month just to keep the thing going. It was usually so technically difficult to keep going. You pretty much had to do that anyway. But now they're a lot more robust. They're a lot easier to use, and generally they're generally on a pay-as-you-go model. So there's usually a discount for annual pricing, but generally, you know, you can get started, try it for 6 months, or just try a demo and say, well, is this going to work for me, before you commit a massive sum of money. So where are we at? So confused. I hope I haven't. In this sort of whirlwind tour of the LMS, the modern learning platform market, I haven't actually confused you more. So I mean, I think the single message I would definitely say is that currently no single platform does it all perfectly. Surprise, surprise. And if you've got to buy a car these days, no one car is going to do it all. So really, you have to decide what you really want. You need your LMS to do. For me, I think it's taking on those 3 hats. So your learner hat, your course designer hat, and your manager's hat. You need to consider, you know, what do you want to be able to do, the LMS to be able to do. But remember, at the end of the day, the customer is king. So probably one of the most important hats still is the learner experience. So you know, when I look at Future Learn, I think, yeah, at the end of the day, you know, at the end of the day, the learner experience trumped all the other ones. So I think that's really key to remember that. You know, learner trumps manager. Ideally, as a learning designer, you know, I'd like to have a little input if I could. If price is a key factor, then use that to shape your shortlist. So don't pine for a BMW 7 Series if you can only afford a Ford Fiesta. You know, stick to looking at Clios and Fiestas. Once you have a short list, then one thing I would definitely do is create a prototype course. So think about the sort of course you're going to build in it. And then I'd probably try and build a course in the demo. So get hold of the demo. Most of these platforms have a demo system. So 14 days, 30 days. See if you can build a course you want to build in it. And then review that. So involve some key stakeholders, learners, course developers, managers with their various hats on. See what they think. And then you know, if you just sign up for 12 months and see how it goes and review it after 12 months. It's not the end of the world. After 12 months, the LMS isn't doing what you quite wanted to do. You know, that's something you can you know, it's not the end of the world to jump ship at some point during that first 12 months. So increasingly, you know, one of the things I saw at Learning Technology this year was the idea of learning ecosystems. I'm not clear exactly what they are yet. So this is my sort of first stab at thinking, well, actually, well, what would that look like? So for me, you know, I think we are beginning to see some of these things need to come together. So the idea of structured learning, the courses, whether they be e-lessons or e-courses or blended courses, but also some of the things from performance support, so resources, whether they're created or whether they're curated. So I think, you know, they begin to think, well, actually, you know, do I need a course or resource? I need to learn something. Is a resource going to help me, or do I need to do a course? But also bringing in things like informal learning, things like communities of practice or e-coaching, e-mentoring, maybe even the idea of an e-portfolio. And central to it all, the idea of search. So I can go in at the point of need and say, well, you know, what do I need? I've got 5 minutes. I need something on this. What's going to help me right now? You know, a classroom course, probably not. A quick curated resource, maybe. But that in turn might lead further down the line to some sort of structured learning, either an e-lesson or an e-course, or maybe a blended or a proper face-to-face workshop. So I've got this in a handout. So there's a copy of this, this sort of early rough diagram in the handout. So helping you choose, well, hopefully this webinar has given you a bit of a flavor of what's ahead of you for choosing an LMS. But there's lots of other help out there. So they have these LMS review sites. So Capterra is very good. So you can filter. You can decide, you know, for example, you can click on gamification or e-commerce and find out the ones that support those things. The only problem is generally most of them support as much as I can. So you often don't lose things if you click on those things. Nevertheless, it does help. You can filter by ratings. You can also then compare. So if you click the add to compare list, you can compare them side by side, just like you're buying a new car. So Capterra is really useful. Also, e-learning industry has a similar thing. So it brings up you can compare the products side by side. So once again, really helpful if you're probably you need probably have some sort of short list to get to this point. So both those, I think Joan's going to share those things with you in the chat. There's also the if you really want to know everything there is to know about choosing an LMS, then there is this document from ADL. It's fairly up to date, November 2016. It's 145 pages, I think. Worth having a look at, but you know, probably not for the faint-hearted. There's also Fosway Group. I've probably seen them around at Learning Technologies. So you know, they have some really useful stuff on different LMSs. They use this 9-grid. Personally, I think it's a bit complicated for most of my clients to get their head around. But once again, you know, Fosway themselves have some really interesting stuff on choosing an LMS. I've got a takeaway, so you can have that at the end of. We'll send up to you with the slides at the end of this webinar. And basically, I'm done. That's it. So it's always hard in these webinars. You can't see people's faces. You don't get the feedback you get in a face-to-face presentation. But hopefully, Joe normally pops up and
John,
says things
thanks.
like, right.
That was really good, and we've already had huge positive feedback. I should say that the chat function has been incredibly busy. I think you switched it off because you were worried about blocking the slide view, but there's a huge amount of content in the chat which I will save and share. Just
brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Put up an evaluation poll, and we're also keen to know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future, so please feel free to vote there. John, did you have a final, sorry, one more thing. I tried to cut and paste your links into the chat. Didn't work, so I'll sort that out. Have you got the slide that's got the upcoming events?
I do indeed.
Because I've already
So
mentioned that we've got one coming up on the learning ecosystem, and people have expressed interest in that already. Before
yes,
that,
I'm intending to beat out that one myself because I'm really keen to. I mean, I think XAPI will be the thing that powers the ecosystem ultimately. So it'll be
yeah,
really interesting to see what Michael has to say about it.
yeah, he's based in Chicago. I think he spoke at DevLearn, I think, last year. So I think he's a fairly well-renowned expert there. So it'll be great to have him present that one. And as you see, one on mobile learning. For those of you who are near London, we've also got our first face-to-face event of the year next Wednesday at White City. And there we'll be showcasing gold award winners from the Learning Technologies Awards, which the ELN organised the judging of. Although the face-to-face events are only available for paid-up members, but if you're not aware, the membership fee is only £29 for the whole year. And I'm sure you'll echo me here, John, when I say it's incredibly good value.
Excellent value, excellent value.
So booking is open on the website, which is down at the bottom of your slide. So you will have to be logged in as a member. If you're not a member and you want to attend, you can sign up as a free member. There is a slight delay because as a community of practice type business, we're not allowed, we have to manually approve every application for membership. But get onto that soon, sooner rather than later. And the recordings are on the YouTube channel, which I've told people about as well. So I guess I should shut up and just say, does anybody have a burning question they would like to ask John? And if so, John, if you open up your chat, if you put that into the chat window now. There is one there already from Richard. How does an organisation migrate from a clunky old school LMS without data corruption? Is that a separate webinar?
Yes. Yes. In fact, yes, I do share your pain. I work with lots of clients who have what I call a legacy LMS. I won't mention any names, but there's some LMS vendors out there whose new ones are really fancy and good looking, but some of these clients got the old one, and upgrading is expensive. They've almost got to buy it again. It's a challenge, but at the end of the day, I think at some point you need, if you decide the LMS is what's holding you back, you need to just take that step. I mean, the good thing is that a lot of these LMSs are, they're pay as you go, so you don't have to fork out 20K to get started these days. You can pay your, for example, a lot of them have a low initial banding of maybe 100 learners. So certainly, sign up to that, build your first course, run your first set of learners through it. You're not committing massively financially to doing that. If you're using external authoring tools like Storyline, then your content can go onto any LMS anyway. So actually, you're protected that way. A bit more tricky if you buy an LMS that has content built in, because then you're sort of the content you then locked into that. So I think you have to just bite the bullet and take that first step. But at least these days, it's way more affordable than it ever used to be. I mean, I'm working with quite small training companies, and now LMSs are now within their budget, and they that's something that's I think very positive that's happened in recent years.
Any more questions? I'm just sharing the results of the poll. It's quite interesting to see what things people are interested in. Look at that, 86% want a webinar on learning design.
Using video, I say using video is, I do, as an instructor designer who's primarily been working in interactive stuff like Storyline and Captivate and Adapt and Elucidate, some of those cool tools, I'm increasingly seeing video as being much more center stage, what I call the video lesson. And I think video is just a medium. It's how you use video is important. But definitely I think in the future video, and especially now with interactive video, so video you can play a video, stop, ask a question. So I think we're going to see a lot more video. We have the bandwidth now generally for it. And it's, people like video, people understand video. Pedagogically, it's not particularly sound, but we can, by putting video into a pathway, so you maybe watch a video and then do a little quiz or something, or do a video and do an assignment. Actually, you can create a nice learning program video.
Comments here about the cost of it, but I guess increasingly as smartphones become better, people can use their own phones. Depends really.
Yeah, and also, I mean, and also things like, I mean, there's lots more cool tools. So I mean, Fuse has got Fuse has got a tool built in to make your own video using the webcam, basically. Yeah. But also Storyline. When you buy Storyline, you get a thing called Replay. Replay is a really cool tool for you sitting down, a bit like I've done today with my PowerPoint. So you sit down with your PowerPoint, and what it does, records you in a little like picture in window thing. So you can be full screen or small screen as you work through your slides. Now, okay, I know that feels a bit like just doing a PowerPoint presentation, but nevertheless, it's actually quite a cheap way of doing something short. As long as you keep it short and directed, it's actually quite a nice thing to use.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
iMovie if you're on a Mac.
Yeah, I'm going to share the chat with everybody. Nobody's come back and said they don't want their details to be shared, so that's fine. And we'll do a follow-up email, and we'll include a copy of your slides, John, won't we?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll do a copy, and there's a bit of a handout too. Right.
Well, let me just say thank you again before I close the session, and thank you to everybody who's contributed to the chat, because it really does help. I know it's maybe slightly distracting if you're presenting, but I was following all the conversation and there were a lot of useful suggestions. So thanks everybody, and don't forget to sign up for either the one-day session next week in London or next month's webinars. Thanks and bye.
Yes, thanks all. Have a good weekend, everybody.